Good afternoon and welcome to this recorded briefing with the Jerusalem Press Club. This call is being recorded on Tuesday, 30th of July afternoon. I am Director of Content, Jonathan Beck. Israel and Hezbollah have been edging close to war for months, all the while trading strikes but keeping the level of flames below all-out war. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of residents have left the north of Israel, as well as the south of Lebanon. Amidst all this, Turkish authoritarian President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who has been lashing out at Israel since the beginning of the war and imposed a trade embargo against the Jewish state in May, said yesterday in his own voice that if Israel attacks Lebanon, he will invade Israel. Our guest today is Gallia Lindenstrauss, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies, the INSS, and editor of the Institute's journal, Strategic Assessment. She specializes in Turkish foreign policy. Her additional research interests are ethnic conflicts, Azerbaijan's foreign policy, the Cyprus issue, and the Kurds, all issues relating to Turkey as well. She has written extensively on these topics, and her commentaries and op-eds have appeared in all of the Israeli major media outlets, as well as in international outlets such as National Interest, Hurriyet Daily News, etc. Dr. Lindenstrauss received her PhD from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where she subsequently also taught. She is also a lecturer at the Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, Dr. Lindenstrauss, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
So can you tell us I mean, this is quite unusual, even for Erdogan, to say that he will invade Israel with Turkish forces. Should we take him at his word, basically?
Okay, so yes, so to analyze this, we have to give a little bit context to the relations between Israel and Turkey. And Turkey and Israel relations have been known ups and downs since the fatal flotilla incidents in 2010. We had two periods of normalization in 2016 to 2018 and to 2022 till the war in Gaza, this recent war in Gaza. So basically all these normalization periods held less than 2 years. So we see that basically mainly there have been downs in Turkish-Israeli relations. And just in September 2023, 3 weeks before the outbreak of the war, we had the first face-to-face meeting between Turkish President Erdogan and Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu. So that was actually seemed to be that things were going well. But as well as they went up, they went very downhill very quickly since the outbreak of the war. In the first 2 weeks of the war, I would say there was a little bit of rethinking in Turkey about Hamas, but this quickly changed and Turkey went back to its complete backing of Hamas and has only been escalating its stance towards Israel since. Things have only gone downhill since. We hear Erdogan speaking against Israel frequently, and the rhetoric is very harsh. But we can also see hostile acts. The first thing I would say is that Hamas militants are enjoying freedom of movement and action on Turkish soil. And we see their involvement in the planning and orchestrating of terror attacks inside Israel and the West Bank. Another thing that Turkey did, as you mentioned in your opening words, is the complete economic boycott of Israel. To the best of my knowledge, there is no precedent. The two countries that enjoyed a free trade agreement went overnight to a complete halt of trade. This is just unprecedented. Both countries are in the WTO, in the OECD. This is something that is unprecedented and has basically continued since May. There is some trade going through third countries, going through the Palestinian Authority, merchants there, but basically there's been a complete halt of trade, and that's been very substantial in the relationship, because in my view the trade relations were the one optimistic note in this downtrend in Turkish-Israeli relations. And I give the metaphor of oxygen. They were the oxygen of the relations, and now the oxygen is gone, so the relationship is in deep trouble. Another thing that Turkey did was threatening Cyprus not to assist Israel if there will be an all-out war between Israel and Lebanon. And I have to remind the audience that Cyprus is an EU member. So basically, Turkey threatened Cyprus in a very hostile way. Another thing is that there have been no condemnations either of Iran's attack of Israel in the mid-April, or condemnations of Hezbollah attacked in Majd al-Shams in the Golan Heights, in which children were killed. We don't hear any condemnation. On the contrary, Turkey says Israel is the provocative actor and Israel is the cause of all the trouble. We see no participation of Turkey in the international coalitions against the Houthis, although also Turkey ships are also affected by this. We see participation of Turkey in the lawfare against Israel, and Turkey also wants to join the case against Israel in the International Court of Justice. And there is also the Turkish media is being used for propaganda against Israel in a very deep and frequent manner. And lastly, there's been pressure on Turkish Jews. There's been legislation that will affect the Jews in Turkey. And this is also another bridge between Israel and Turkey that Turkey is burning at the moment. Now, many say that this threat that Erdogan did this week was the first explicit threat to Israel. It's not completely true. There have been in the past other threatening remarks, but definitely this is the fact that he compared Israel to Libya and to Nagorno-Karabakh does suggest that there is more concrete thinking behind it. I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow morning, but Turkey is preparing the ground by saying that Israel is a direct threat on Turkey. By these remarks of Erdogan that after Gaza and after Lebanon, Israel will proceed to Syria and to the south of Turkey. This is very alarming rhetoric coming out of Turkey. Now, when I try to analyze why Erdogan said what he did, well, first, I think I should point to the domestic explanation. There have been pressures on Erdogan to not only speak against Israel, but also act against Israel. And this was one of the reasons we saw the decision to boycott Israel economically. And now this is not enough for those who think that Turkey should do something. An economic boycott is not enough. And the next supposedly logical step is doing something militarily. Another thing is to deter Israel from going to an all-out war with Lebanon. Turkey will also be affected by this kind of regional war. Turkey has very intensive trade relations with Middle Eastern countries, and hence Turkey does not want to see, as nobody I think wants to see, a regional war. So I think this threat is also something to deter Israel. And lastly, of course, if there's a rhetoric that Israel is a direct threat to Turkey, and I have to say this is complete nonsense, and this is a made-up story. I don't see any rhetoric in Israel that ever targeted Turkey. But anyhow, if this rhetoric is being voiced and this conspiracy theory is voiced in Turkey, then of course, if Israel is a direct threat, then one must prepare and also militarily. Now, obviously, a lot is on the plate of the international community at the moment. And of course, the US is trying both to bring an end to the war in Gaza and also to stop the escalation between Israel and Hezbollah from an all-out war between Israel and Lebanon and a regional war. But I think the international community, and specifically the US, is not paying enough attention to the Turkish threats against Israel. Nobody basically condemned Turkey about the economic boycott of Israel. And as I said, this is the oxygen of the relations. And if you take that, the relationship is in danger. And now also these threats are basically not, they're received with silence in the West. But I think that Turkey as a NATO member should not voice such threats against a country that NATO does cooperate with quite frequently. And also, I think the West has no interest, of course, in seeing any confrontation between Israel and Turkey. And I'll stop here, and I'll be happy to answer any other questions.
Okay, thank you for this very conclusive explanation. So I wanted to ask, first of all, the threat yesterday, as harsh as it is a threat in words, and it doesn't cost him much. The embargo in May, surely Turkey itself paid the price for it economically. I don't know the percentage of trade with Israel from the entire, the national product of Turkey, but surely it hurts them too. That's the one thing. And the second thing that you mentioned near the end of your statement is about NATO. How can he get away with it? I mean, NATO countries should have some leverage against such statements, or against, especially his kind of being a NATO member and essentially quite chummy with Iran, let's say.
So with regard to your question about trade, the Turkish exports to Israel are about 2% of Turkish exports worldwide. So it's not completely trivial, but of course, Turkey has many other customers. There were factories that were catering for the Israeli consumer. For example, food factories that had a kosher certificate to operate in Israel. So this does damage certain manufacturers that were working closely with Israel. And I think it also should alert international corporations that are operating in Turkey. For example, Hyundai car, Toyota cars that are manufactured in Turkey can no longer be shipped to Israel. So this is not only affecting Turkish local manufacturers, but it's also affecting international corporations, and I think we should pay attention to that. You're right. So sometimes threats are only words, but I think the Israeli public has a very hard time accepting that these are empty words. After October 7th, we take every threat very seriously. And I think we should be very careful in this very volatile environment in the Middle East, not escalating with rhetoric. And I think this is where the international partners of Turkey should come in. And I don't think they have to say it publicly, but definitely discreetly tell Turkey that it did cross a red line, both in the economic boycott. Again, no other country that had previous relations with Israel did what Turkey did. So Turkey went overboard in its reaction. And also in this threat, this is, again, it's not good for anyone, more instability in the Middle East. Turkey and Israel used to be actors that could cooperate to promote the status quo in the Middle East, to promote the stability in the Middle East. And no actor has interest in this instability. Turkey, of course, is a very important NATO member. It has the second largest army in NATO. Its location is very critical. But when Turkey voices these threats, and with other actions Turkey did, for example, buying the S-400 from Russia, Turkey is a less reliable partner of NATO, and that also has meanings. And I think at the end of the day, when you look historically, the big threat to Turkey was Russia. So in the context of the war in Ukraine, I think Turkey is flirting too much with Russia in this respect, and should remember where its really security guarantees are laid, and that is in NATO.
Okay, thank you. I have another final question. You mentioned two periods since the flotilla when there was a thawing or an improvement in relations. Can you say what was behind this? Was this pure diplomacy, or was there an economic motive for it, or changes in politics in Israel? Was it domestic reasons in Turkey, etc.?
I think this is a very important question. What brought about the previous normalizations between Israel and Turkey? And in 2016, it was definitely the Obama administration, which pushed very hard for Israel and Turkey to reconcile after the flotilla event. The Obama administration also succeeded in bringing Netanyahu to apologize to Erdogan in 2013, and later the full normalization agreement in 2016. So you see, when a US administration thinks this is a priority, then it pushes that forward in 2016. In 2022, the actor that was pushing the normalization was actually Turkey in many respects. Turkey felt isolated. It had problems in its relationship with many countries in the Middle East, including Egypt, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Israel was one of these countries in which Turkey had problem with, and Turkey tried to improve relations because it felt very isolated, and that the other actors, for example, the UAE, Israel, and Greece and Cyprus were cooperating in a way that it felt intimidated by, and hence it tried to push for normalizations. I think also now, we're not seeing it yet, but if I look back on the past decade, when Israel acted provocatively against Israel or in a threatening manner against Israel, it usually later on also acted provocatively and threatening against other actors in the region. So I think this stance against Israel is not something that should be seen in an isolated manner, but rather seen as a prelude to other provocations Turkey will do in the near future.
Okay, I do have one more question, which I kind of think I know the answer to. There isn't really any opposition to Erdogan on such statements inside Turkey, right? He's got a pretty firm grip on the politics there for the foreseeable future, no?
Turkish public opinion is very empathic to the Palestinian cause. This has been throughout over the years. We saw this empathy of the Turkish public towards the Palestinians. Of course, in times of direct conflict, the empathy even grows. This is something that transcends only the Islamic actors in Turkey or the Islamic parts of Turkish public opinions, but also in the left in Turkey, which acts like left in other countries. So this is definitely a unifying factor in Turkish public opinion. I don't think they want to go till the level of threatening Israel in military action, most people, but this is something that is pushing public opinion. And we saw that with the results of the local elections in Turkey in the end of March, which was basically the results were not good for Erdogan's party, that there was a rethinking among Erdogan and his advisors what should be the way to move forward. And he was criticized during this local campaign that he was a hypocrite, that he was criticizing Israel very vocally, but doing nothing in practice to accompany this rhetorical criticism. And so this embargo on Israel, this economic embargo on Israel, definitely came as a response to criticism in the Turkish public opinion. So there's not too much opposing voices to Erdogan's policy, but we should also say it's not only Erdogan, it's also his advisors, also his foreign minister, Hakan Fidan, that is moving him to this direction. Having said all that, I don't think there's a vocal opposition to these acts. I think there are actors in the political scene or specific people who do believe that Turkey should act according to realpolitik, and what Turkey is doing is not realpolitik. You do not embargo a country economically with which you have such close economic relations. You do not act so differently than other countries. And basically, in terms of affecting what is happening in Gaza and the diplomatic maneuvers to solve the war, Turkey is completely not there. Egypt is there, the UAE is there, of course, the United States. Turkey, nobody listens to Turkey because Turkey has such a biased stance against Israel that it burned all its diplomatic capabilities in solving this conflict. And I think that's, again, is a mistake Turkey is making, and hopefully it will rectify it.
Okay, thank you very much for this, Dr. Lindenstrauss. I hope the world and our government will manage to correct those relations, because the last thing Israel needs now is more enemies. Thank you for this briefing.
Thank you very much.